It's been a while since we put on our work uniform and covered some scary night shift stories. I figured you could use more of these chills to remind everyone to stay on their toes. So as you sit back and relax, I remind you that if you have a story you'd like to share for an upcoming episode, then you can send it in at tcfnarrations@gmail.com. Just make sure that story hasn't been sent in to another narrator or posted online. That way we can keep everything fresh and new. But with that out of the way, let's jump right into Volume 2 of Night Shift Stories. Number 1. Late Night Supermarket Creep. I used to work the night shift for my local supermarket chain in a small town in North Dakota in the late 1990s. Being the kind of person who isn't a big fan of crowds, this nighttime work was perfect. I would essentially stock shelves and take the boxes of food and merchandise out of the delivery trucks. Admittedly, it was a lot tougher than it seemed. Most people would say, well, all you gotta do is just put the food where it belongs. And yeah, that's true. But add on top of that task, carrying heavy boxes and going up sets of stairs for 8 hours. It was quite the workout, and there'd even be times I'd just get home and fall asleep in bed from being so sore. But I digress. This isn't about my little complaints. Instead, it's about a very real and creepy situation my fellow co-workers and I had experienced firsthand. I remember this happening during December since I was wearing my large coats to work. Temperatures were easily in the teens and my hands felt numb if I didn't put on gloves. Anyways, I clocked into work as per usual this evening, and my manager tells me and the other 4 co-workers we would be a lot more busier than usual. This was because Christmas was just a couple of weeks away, and people in town were emptying the shelves just as quickly as we could stock them. After this brief little meeting, we start getting to work, and the hours go by as normal. I want to say maybe 2 or 3 a.m. It's my lunch break, and I'm sitting in the break room with another coworker, enjoying the pasta my mom had made me. We'll call this coworker William. Anyways, you could hear Christmas music over the small radio we had in the break room as we stared into the vast empty wasteland that was the field behind our store. We must have gotten so distracted with watching the snow fall when we were startled by movement at the corner of the window. We see a face, and at first we thought we might have been imagining it. But sure enough, what looks to be like a homeless man in a hoodie is staring at William and I intently. We weren't sure what to do. After all, it was freezing, and there's no door in the break room to let him in. Also, these aren't the kind of windows you can open. Thus, we called our manager over the radio, and we tell him there was a man standing outside. He tells us he would go check up on him, and the man soon disappears. A minute later, our manager calls us over the radio, advising both me and William he doesn't see anyone, but he can see footprints in the snow. We found it sort of strange, but we soon forget it and get back to work. Fast forward no more than 20 minutes later, and I'm going to move some shopping carts that had been left outside in the back. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I heard snow crunching just beyond my line of view. Quickly, I turn toward the direction of the noise, and I can see a figure just out of the building's lights. Thinking it was a coworker coming to help me, I stand perfectly still. But then I get the chills, and not from it being cold, when I see the man from the window had returned. This time, he's got one of the largest knives I've ever seen. It looked like a hunting knife, to be honest. I was sort of in disbelief and I couldn't move. After all, I've never seen such a creepy sight before. That was until I began to hear him mumbling, and I could tell by his speech that he was drunk. Anyways, he stops in place a mere 50 feet from where I'm standing, and I think, cool, he's going to leave. So I start to walk away from him. Then, all of a sudden, he says something along the lines of wanting to slash every one of us until we no longer could breathe. That was enough reassurance to book it toward the back door, as I hear him quickly gaining on me. This was the point I see my coworker Juliet just beginning to walk out of the back door, and she's got a smile on her face, but it soon changes as she goes pale. "Get inside! Lock the door!" I yell, practically in tears, just hoping I don't trip and fall in the snow. What a relief I felt when I'm hit with the warm air of the building's heater, which is then followed by the slam of the large metal door and the locking mechanism ensuring this creep wouldn't be able to get in. The man then starts to kick and pound at the door, demanding we let him in, or we were going to be sorry. Juliet called 911. Meanwhile, I announce over the intercom to everyone in the building to remain locked in place and to ensure windows and doors are secure. The cops got there about 7 minutes later, but it seemed like hours at the time. Sadly, they couldn't find him, and he never did return. To this day, we are unsure of who he was and what he would have planned had he gotten inside the supermarket. Number 2. My dad's taxi driver scare. Hey there, creepy fox. This story isn't mine, but it's actually from my dad, Enrique. I told him about your channel and he absolutely loves it, so keep up the good work. Anyways, I went ahead and wrote up his taxi driver experience because I don't think I've ever heard you cover a story from the perspective of a taxi driver. By the way, we live in Houston, Texas, but my family is originally from Mexico City, and that's where the location of this takes place. This was in the 1980s when my dad Enrique was around 22 or 23 years old, and he had just been let go from his job. It wasn't because he had done anything wrong. It's just the company couldn't afford to keep so many workers. A shame considering how hard my dad works. Anyways, he picked up work here and there but landed a more secure line of income as a taxi driver. He did that for about 5 years, and one of the creepiest rides of his life came one early April morning at 3 a.m. My dad had been driving around the downtown district and picking people up for about 4 hours when one man waves him down at the corner of a liquor store. My dad doesn't really think much of him as he steps into the back seat and tells my dad he needed to get to a friend's house. All starts like normal until my dad could get the whiff of alcohol. My dad had dealt with these sorts of customers in the past, but they were always pretty chill. This customer was starting to act weird. At least that's what my dad told me. He said he kept looking into a small grocery bag while fumbling around with something in his jacket pocket. Asking if the man was alright, he responds back by saying just keep driving. Soon my dad begins to realize the directions he was given were taking him out of the city to a more remote part of the countryside. My dad asks for reassurance, and when he looks into the rearview mirror, he gets the scare of a lifetime. The man has a revolver in his hands, and instantly my dad begins to panic. You're going to do what I say, and I promise you're going to make it home, the man expresses with a chilling smirk across his face. My mom, being pregnant at the time with my brother, assured my father he couldn't take any sort of chances. They continue to drive for another 12 to 15 minutes, exiting and driving down a dirt road for about a mile. Finally, the man tells my dad stop here, and he does. Okay, get out, the man says as he points the revolver closer. My dad, scared out of his mind, steps out of the taxi and then watches this man crawl into the driver's seat. Just like that, he takes off, leaving my dad out in the middle of nowhere at 4 in the morning. My dad recalls that being the scariest part of the entire experience. Anyways, my dad told me he could see some lights of what he thought were a home far in the distance, and he started walking toward them. It took him about 15 minutes to reach those lights, and he was correct. It was a home. My dad knocked and knocked, and he was met by an elderly man who was completely shocked at seeing this young man with a face of panic and fear. My dad explains what he had just experienced, and both are shocked, but relieved he was safe. The elderly man drove my dad back to his house, where his family was worried sick. Sadly, the man who took my dad's taxi was never caught, and his identity remains a mystery, even to this day. Number 3. Security guard versus armed man. For privacy reasons, I won't mention a location. I will tell you, however, that I work the third shift as an on-campus security guard for a community college, and this happened around 7 years ago. I'd say it was maybe 11:40 p.m., and I was sitting in my vehicle that was parked next to the library. All of a sudden, I was interrupted when I got a call over the radio. Something about a student seeing a suspicious man walking around the parking lot. I went ahead and told dispatch I would go check it out. Less than 2 minutes of a drive later, I arrived at the parking structure and I began scanning each of the 5 floors. Floors 1 through 3, nothing. When I reached the 4th floor, I saw what had been reported. Someone in a red hoodie trying to open a car. I drive up to them nonchalantly and I ask, "Excuse me, sir, but can I help you with something this evening?" He looks at me for a brief moment before he begins to walk away. I went ahead and exit my vehicle and approach him as I was starting to suspect he might be hiding something in his jacket. "Hold on, sir. Can I please talk to you for a second? Some students reported seeing a suspicious figure matching your description. I just want to make sure it wasn't you." He suddenly snaps at me, cursing at me and calling me all these names I'd rather not repeat. Now anyone knows that when you ask a simple question and are met with such anger, chances are that person's guilty of something. And trust me, I don't judge by looks or anything. I'm just doing my job as a security guard. Also, I don't take things personally, and that's why the things he said didn't really get to me. Anyways, I try asking him some more questions, until suddenly he reaches into his pocket and he tells me he's got a knife. Instantly, I back up, grabbing my taser from my utility belt. I tell him to drop the knife as he starts to get closer and closer. Meanwhile, I'm keeping my eyes on him and walking back to my vehicle. That's where my radio was located so I could call the police. Unfortunately, this was the point where I think he realized my plan. He sprints at me like a cheetah after its prey, and I have no choice but to use the taser, as he drops almost instantly. But then, I'm guessing in some sort of adrenaline rush, he gets back up and he continues to charge at me. I grab my pepper spray and that finally seems to do the trick as he begins flailing his arms back and forth. I grab the knife and then radio for backup, which luckily we do have a police station across the street. Within minutes, 3 police cruisers pull up into the parking structure and are able to place the man in handcuffs. When all was said and done, the officers praised me for my bravery, and they said that I acted in self-defense, which again, I sort of had no other choice. I later found out that the man had been intoxicated, and he had just recently been let out of jail a week or so prior, apparently for armed robbery. Guess he was looking to get back into the game, so to speak. I'm just glad that nobody was hurt. Number 4. My time as a nightclub bouncer. I used to be a bouncer for a couple of venues in downtown LA up to just a few years ago. For anyone in that sort of line of work, you already know how many scary situations you've got to deal with. Whether it be patrons fighting, a patron wanting to fight you, or your entire club going on lockdown because some police were looking for an armed robber who just so happened to have snuck his way in, it's always got its fair share of interesting. Now, although I can spend hours giving you details on all my experiences, I thought I would go ahead and just give you one of my favorites. If you enjoy it, then I'll make sure to send some more of my stories to the Creepy Fox. Anyways, I'm going to focus on one venue in particular. This evening we had a metal night, where a bunch of local metal bands came to perform. However, it being a ticketed event, you not only needed a ticket, but a wristband. If you had none, I'd hate to say it, but we had to turn you back. And that happened quite a bit that evening. I think it had to do with the popularity of one of the groups. I already forgot what they were called since I could care less for that kind of music. At around 10:30 p.m., myself and another coworker were finally starting to catch a break from checking people's tickets and wristbands. This gave me an opportunity to quickly grab some water and head to the restroom. Here's when things got pretty weird. As I exit the break room and make my way into the front lobby, I see some older mid-40s dude starting to pick a fight with a young couple who I'd say were no older than 25. I later learned that the dude who had started the fight was flirting with the guy's girlfriend and trying to convince her to leave him. Anyways, I went ahead and walked up to him because it looked as if things were starting to get pretty serious. "Okay, that's enough, you two. Break it up. What's happening?" The older man tries to cover his tracks, saying these were his kids, even though I could already tell that wasn't the case. "You can't kick me out. I paid for this event." Here was when I noticed something else. I saw no wristband, which rose some alarms. "Sir, you need to be wearing your wristband at all times in order to be here. otherwise I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He all about lost it before settling down for a brief moment, reaching into his pocket. This was when I assumed he was going to show me his ticket and wristband so he could one-up me. Boy, was I wrong. In one quick motion, he takes out a pocket knife and he takes a swing in my direction. Luckily, he only manages to nick my uniform, missing my skin by just inches. Another patron saw what was happening, and together, both of us are able to tackle this man to the ground. The other bouncer, who we will call Johnny, is called over by another group of concert-goers, and we are able to subdue the man until police arrived. About 2 days later, I was talking with the owner of the venue, and he tells me that the man I had subdued had apparently been involved with a bank robbery a few years ago. Talk about crazy. Anyways, that's it for this story. Like I mentioned, I've got so many more night shift encounters and more from my time as a bouncer. Just let me know if you all want to hear more. Until then, I hope you're all staying safe. Number 5. Convenience store robbery. I worked as a janitor for 5 years at a Motel 6 in the early 2000s. We are also located next to a McDonald's, gas station, and a convenience store. This meant the only people that we would have stay at the motel were usually those on road trips. Anyways, that's not really important to the story. It was my first 15-minute break, and I decided to walk over to the convenience store to grab some coffee and a couple of donuts. I know, you don't need to tell me, it's not a good combination. As soon as I walk into the convenience store, I was greeted by the cashier, who I'd become really close friends with in those 5 years I worked at the motel. While I went to get my coffee from the coffee machine, the cashier started to put some donuts into a little brown paper bag. Here's when things went from calm and quiet to downright terrifying. I hear tires screeching against the pavement, and then moments later, I hear yelling. The words robbery and holdup are said, and I go ahead and peek from behind the aisle I was standing in. By the entrance are 2 men in ski masks with pistols and duffel bags. "Put the money in the bag and make it quick," one of them demands, as the other starts to walk around the store. He ends up locating me pretty quickly and tells me to follow him to the front. He then keeps both the cashier and I in his line of view, while his partner starts putting cash into the duffel bags. Although it lasted maybe a minute, it honestly felt like an eternity. There was just this overall fear in between myself and the cashier that I can't even begin to describe unless you're in this sort of situation, which I would never wish on my worst enemy. Once they emptied the register, they asked me to hand over any valuables. I gave them my wallet and my watch, and the cashier did the same. Then, as soon as they had appeared, they jump into a waiting dark van and drive off. We were scared beyond belief. We immediately called police, but since we are in the middle of nowhere, it took them almost 30 minutes just to arrive. We gave them our statement, but unfortunately, they were never caught. Hey there. Before we get to the final story, I want to take this opportunity to thank my channel members. Thank you to Robbie, Bo, Kim, Spunky the Nutcase, Tabitha, Ingrid, Evil's Girl, Corey, Zombie Mama, Haiti, Benjamin, Scott, Sean, Dopey Dog, Conqueror Super 1990, and our 2 newest channel members, Vicky and Hunt24. Now, if you'd like to help support what I do here along with getting early video access and a video shout out, then check out the channel memberships option. It's right next to where it says subscribe. Anyways, let's get on to our final story. Number 6. Car dealership break-in. This happened in the late 1980s when I just moved to the United States from Mexico. This puts me at roughly 23 or 24 years of age. I had been looking for work for a couple of weeks as I settled into my new life, and I landed a job cleaning some offices for some car dealerships a family friend owned. As this was night work, I would sleep during the day and get up at around 6:30 p.m. I'd have some food, get changed, and then carpool to the first dealership with my cousin, who cleaned beside me. We'll call her Veronica. Now, on a normal night beginning at 9 p.m., we would clean up to 3 dealerships. For each one, we would clean the office where all the business is done, the restrooms, the back room, and of course the show floor where all the cars are located. Combined, it took us about 8 to 9 hours, and by sunrise we are exhausted and we can't wait to head home for a quick breakfast, then it's off to bed. Anyways, now that you get an idea of this schedule, let me tell you about this one night. We were on our second car dealership, which was 2 stories, and myself and Veronica were on the second floor, mopping and dusting. We both started to get hungry, and we thought about the lunch we had packed. However, I had forgotten to take it out of the back seat of our car. Not really a problem, it was just a matter of going and retrieving it. I told Veronica I would be right back and head to the parking lot just behind the building. This was where I first noticed something was wrong. For context, the car dealership was just on the outskirts of the city. This meant traffic was kept to a minimum, more so at 2 in the morning. Well, considering our vehicle was the only one parked when we got here, I was somewhat surprised to see an unmarked van parked at the far end of the parking lot. I quickly ignored it, and I get to grabbing our lunch. Fast forward maybe 7 or 8 minutes later, we were in the upstairs office eating some sandwiches and chips, when all of a sudden we hear a loud crash come from the first floor. Both of us practically jumped out of our seat as I go to investigate what had caused the disturbance. The windows. Yes, the lobby windows of the first floor had been completely smashed. But you know what else I could see? The van I'd noticed just a few minutes ago. It was now in the lobby. I watched as 3 people in all black clothing and masks storm into the car dealership, and they began making their way around. I froze when I could see that they were armed with knives. Veronica, get in the office and call 911, quick, I tell her, voice shaking with panic and fear. We went ahead and moved one of the desks and a couple of chairs to block the doorway as we start calling 911. Here's more or less of what was said.
Hello? Operator? We need police here, right away. Me and my cousin are working at this car dealership, then some armed men just broke in. Okay, we're sending police as we speak. Can you get to a safe location? And can you try to hide?
The operator relays, to which we tell her we were already hiding. No less than a minute later, we can hear footsteps on the second floor, and we hear the voice of the men as one of them instructs the other to come check the room we were in. By now, the lights were already off, and we are hiding behind some furniture at the far end of the office. I remember the one who was at the door jingling the door handle, complaining he was unable to get the door open. This was followed by what we assumed was kicking as the table was slowly beginning to move. I'm happy to say they didn't make it in, and quickly they moved on to another portion of the car dealership. Those next few minutes honestly felt like an eternity, but soon the operator tells us the police have just arrived, but they advise us to stay locked in place. 5 minutes later, the operator tells us it's safe to exit, and the police will be waiting. We still weren't sure until someone knocks on the office door saying he's a police officer. We have him slide his badge under the door as reassurance, since there was no window to look out of. Then we exit to see 2 officers standing there. We ended up calling the owner and we gave our statements before we finally went home at 6 a.m. Obviously, that dealership was closed for the next week while new windows were installed. Veronica and I never had any other sort of creepy things happen, and after about 2 years of cleaning, I got a job working for a friend's insurance firm, where I'm still at today.